Hello, hi, my name is Jared, aka Prosperity42, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Walkin and Talkin, wherein myself and some other Blizzard nerd are going to do a little bit of walking and a whole lot of talking. I'm joined again today by the luscious Whoop for another discussion. There he is.
There I am.
There's Whoop. So this week, we're kind of continuing the discussion from last week, where we talked about talents, more focused on character customization, and in this episode we're going to be talking about the value of secondary stats versus item level. So yeah, let's go ahead and get on a walking. This is
my favorite topic. I love this topic so much, just because it's so polarizing.
It is. It really is. Like if you wanna make a bunch of WoW nerds angry, bring up secondary stats and watch the fireworks. It's a fantastic show. But yeah, first up on the docket, what are the merits of devaluing secondary stats in lieu of pure item level? And before we get into it, I want to say that this is happening. This absolutely is happening, right? Where secondary stats are staying on gear, but they are how do I put this? Wildly irrelevant.
the amount of secondary stats on the gear, like it's on there, but it's such a small amount that it's not impactful. Like
right,
at all. You know, like the difference between a heroic dungeon geared character and secondary stats and someone who was scaled to mythic on raid testing was like a few percent of your chosen stat. Yeah. So that's where this is coming from.
So I'll take the first one.
Right.
There's kind of been an issue where most of the character customization was determined by the stats that you had on your gear, and you went after specific pieces of gear, and sometimes never got specific pieces of gear in order to make a particular build work.
Right.
And that problem has been one that has been plaguing Blizzard for forever. They really just haven't really been able to solve that problem, and I think they've just kind of thrown in the towel, so to speak, on the issue, because there's no good way to say, hey, let's have stats on gear, but make them kind of impactful so that you go after specific stuff, and there is the whole part of this where gear is the carrot on a stick. Gear is how they get you to go complete any given content.
Right.
So making specific pieces of gear less relevant. Of course.
Sorry.
Naturally. Having secondary stats not be relevant on specific pieces of gear, and having the larger picture of what are the total stats on your gear more relevant has been where they're pushing more towards. But then again, that same token, they've said they don't want to re-implement something like reforging that let you have that minimal control over every last piece of gear that you have, so that you can get the stats that you want.
Right.
But they want a gearing system in place to where you get a piece of gear, you slap it on. End of discussion. Like that's all you gotta do.
Right. That's been their whole motivation for lots of things, like the enchanting and jewel crafting changes, where you don't slot 3 gems in every piece anymore.
Right.
Or whatever it is, like all those changes, and reforging and hit going away, and all those things are to make it so that it's encouraged for you to see a piece of gear, see it has, and the way they want it to be is that you see it as a higher item level and you just slap it on. And just because it's an in-game way for them to say, hey, this piece is better than that one that has a lower item.
Yeah.
But it makes a divisive point, because lots of people for so long, especially in kind of the higher end, rating scene and that kind of stuff, have, tried to really, squeeze out as many points of, say, crit as possible for whatever given class it is. And then some classes favor other stats, to where you might forgo a large item level upgrade just because it doesn't have the right stat on it. And that's what they're trying to bypass. They want it to be that.
Absolutely.
You get a piece of gear, it's 20 item levels higher. You say, "Oh boy, thanks Santa," and you slap it on. Which I think and I might be the outlier here, but I'm 100% for that system. I'm 100% for that.
You're actually, surprisingly, you're in the majority for that, for this side, because most people don't want to have to think about what gear they're putting on. They just want to see the higher numbers, and that's all they care about. And and it's only when you get into the upper echelons of high tier mythic rating and mythic plus keystone runs and PvP that they care enough about the stats that they have on their gear that they get a piece that to anyone else would be an upgrade and say, "That's a piece of crap gear.
Right.
Don't want to serve you in my family. Stay in the water."
Right.
And
it comes down to, it reminds me of, and this is it's gear related. I was going to say it's a little bit off the cuff, but it reminds me of around Christmas time, Preach Gaming did a series on how to become a better player. Right. And a couple of episodes down in that series, he covered simming, like SimCraft.
Right.
And that's where all the viewers and comments and stuff went downhill. That was too far for a lot of people to go, because they don't want to have to think about that small of a margin between what secondary stats are good, what secondary stats are not. They just want to see that higher item level and put it on.
Right. And that's kind of like the crux of the whole thing, is like, how do you have a gear system that allows you to customize what your character is able to do if the stats on it are irrelevant?
Yeah.
Like what is, like the question says, like what's the value of devaluing secondary stats just so item level is the only thing that matters? Because there are a lot of people that say, "Hey, this talent would be great if I had like this certain haste point that I was able to reach, or say like this talent would be great if I had like 50% mastery." And if you can't do that consistently with your gear, there's no point to it,
Right. If they're gonna devalue secondary stats so much on gear, why even have them? Why not just make it have primary stat, or even just make it full PvP template all the time,
right? And
make it so that item level it just scales you up by whatever percentage it is in the background, and you just put it on. You don't.
Yeah.
But it's hard to please. You can't please everybody when it comes to this kind of thing.
You can't have a system like that in place for everyone, because everyone's gonna be different in their approach to how they look for gear, and what options they want to have available to them. And that brings us to the next point of why are the only stats that aren't relevant the ones that determine the power of our characters the most? And that's to say that primary stats, the ones of stamina, intellect, strength, and dexterity, or agility, sorry. Why, I've been playing too much D&D.
Right.
Why are those the ones that are wildly irrelevant, but whenever you get a piece of gear, like for example, you get a piece of gear that's 20 item levels higher, you see it's got stamina, like a huge up in stamina, huge up in agility, and it's got mastery and haste on it, and you either say, "Oh, this piece is great, that's got 1100 mastery on it, great, bring it on," or you see the same piece and say, "Oh, good God, that that piece has mastery on it. No, get this out of here.
And classes
and you
like,
don't even think about the agility or the strength or whatever. You don't think about it at all.
And it's like you say, they're labeled primary, and secondary stats are labeled secondary. So you'd think it would be that way at least a little bit, but it's so not.
Exactly.
That it's funny. And
it's
certain
counterintuitive.
are, because you would think, it's exactly right. It's counterintuitive for someone who isn't in the know about this kind of thing. You see that it has more strength on it, and it's strength. It has more strength or whatever. It has more primary on it. Then it's better.
Exactly.
Only when something is like the same item level, but it has different secondary stats on it, that's when you start to think about that thing. Unless you're kind of in the know about, what stats are good for your class, what stats are not good. And it varies by class as well. Some classes, their secondary stats are balanced. Their value is so similar that it really doesn't matter.
Right.
But some classes it really does matter. Take like Fire Mage, for example.
Or Protection Paladin, where you literally take nothing but haste, and anything that doesn't have haste on it is absolute garbage.
Like there's extreme outliers that only care about secondary stats, but then you swing the other way. There are classes that exist that really don't kind of care about them and are falling into the mold that Blizzard wants to make of item level equals everything.
Right. And that brings us to the final the final little discussion point of this video is what systems could be looked at to resolve the issues of a stat system based solely on gear. And I'll let you take this one first.
Well, it's hard to do because for example, because a system like this, like the answer to the question is always going to be like a big overhaul of something. It's not a quick fix answer. Because say they take secondary stats, or even say they take primaries off too, and just all gear just has an item level. Okay, just hypothetically. And, that item level, increases your like a PvP template in the background, and you just slap on whatever. But say there was a second system in place that could kind of direct you into a direction of favoring one secondary stat over the other and actually getting more of that. Bring back something like Path of the Titans that was teased from Cataclysm, or any kind of system that's not related to the gear that you have on your character, to make it so that you specialize, or you can choose kind of what stats you want. Maybe you love crit. Maybe you just want to see as large numbers as possible on your screen.
Right.
And you want to stack crit. Well, go for it. There could be a system in place, and I know I'm being pretty ambiguous here. I don't have details, but there could be a system in place to where, maybe some type of way that makes your character want more crit or want more haste or something like that. Kind of like how, old talents, you might put a point in a talent for 5 levels that gave 1% crit or something. Maybe talents like that or choices like that as you level up, or even post level cap in a sort of Paragon level-y kind of way, where you get to pick, well, I say sort of, almost exactly like, think Diablo Paragon levels, where you get a Paragon level, there's like 4 different options, and you get to pick, and WoW example, you could pick crit, haste, mastery, versatility, and, you could stack those up to get values you want. If certain classes have like soft caps of certain stats for like haste or something, you could tailor that without having to worry about getting gear that has those stats on it. Something like that would be the way I'd go with it.
And I will say, take it the other direction. I do have details of how I would like to see this problem solved.
Good. I'm glad one of us.
I would like to see a system in place where you determined your stats on your character sheet, and that you had individual control, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me that you slap on a piece of gear and can lift a dumbbell that's 5 pounds
Right.
heavier. Like
Right.
that does not make any sense. Period. So they solve the problem by having your character sheet be where you allocate your stats, and the stuff like strength, stuff like stamina, all that stuff scales based on your item level. And well, basically the entire system scales based off of your item level. So I mean, it kind of in a sense, is determined like like you do have kind of a sense of, you put on a piece of gear that's better and you get a little bit stronger. But it's all scaled off of your item level, and you are the one that dictates what stats you want to go for. So say you want a talent that scales really well off of haste, but doesn't scale that well off of crit. Then you could say, this is the ratio that I want. I want more haste, and it could be like you get 4 stats and you get four little check marks, and you can put the 4 check marks in whatever configuration you want. You can put them all in haste, you can put them all in crit, you can put them 2 in crit, 2 in mastery, however you want it. You could be completely balanced out where you have 1 in each. That could be the system that determines the scale of which those particular stats follow, and it just scales based off of your item level. And that would solve all of their problems, literally every single one, because they would give the customization to the players in how they want their character to be stat allocated, as far as secondary stats go. And they would be able to effectively say, you get a new piece of loot, it's got a higher item level, slap it on, go.
Yeah.
Problem solved. I mean, it would create another problem in that stuff like gems and enchants would get a little bit weirder. But then again, you could just, that could be stuff that's reserved for, say, tertiary stats, the ones like leech and move speed, and all the ones that you just have like a small chance of getting on any given piece of loot that drops. All of that, you could have all of those be granted by your professions, and have enchants and gems and all that kind of stuff be the source of it. And that would pretty much solve that problem. So that's what I would like to see. It's never gonna happen. Never in a million years.
And that's the thing, right? A lot of these things that we bring up would never happen, but they're.
Let's go ahead and stop down here.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go to the bedroom this time.
Right.
We can go over here. But that's the thing, right? A lot of these systems that we talk about in these in this series, and things that we bring up in general, kind of would never happen. But it's
fun to talk about. It's fun to keep the discussion going.
Yeah, you're playing armchair dev, and that's it's if you care about this kind of thing enough to play armchair dev, it's fun. It's fun to kind of figure out what could be solutions for everyday kind of things that are issues with the game that happen from expansion to expansion that may not even be the same problem. It's an ever-flowing kind of topic of discussion where you get to play armchair dev, and that's awesome. Yeah.
And that, again, like I did last week, I'd like to open up the discussion to you guys listening or watching, or I guess technically there isn't so much going on the screen, so you could theoretically you could be listening to this and do some grinding and WoW, do something else, some PvP, or listening to our docile voices. But I'd like to hear your opinions on what system changes, system-wide changes you'd like to see to stats to make them relevant, or to keep them relevant and not just have them disappear under the guise of item level. Let us know down in the comments below, or on Twitter. You can find me, Prosperity_42, and you can find Whoop here at dark.com, spelled out. DOTCOM, yeah.
There it is.
There it is, right on the screen for you. But yeah, like to hear from you, if you're so inclined. And also, of course, you can see our Patreon page. You can become a patron and support what we're doing here on the channel, to support these kind of discussions that we've got going on. Patreon.com/prosperity42. But that's gonna be it for this week. Thank you for watching, but our feet and our jaws are tired. We'll see you next week when we talk and walk a little bit more.